good. So let's go ahead and pull up your notes. We'll finish off some Alexander notes and then get to, well, not that. All right, and then get to our debate here momentarily. All right, so we left off with Alexander entering into Babylon after he has Darius III killed, right? Or excuse me, after Darius III is killed. And then what did he do to the bodyguards that killed Darius? He killed them, slit their throats right then and there. That's what you do, right? All right, so then Alexander, when he got to Babylon, what did he do that had, I mean, you can see it as maybe a conqueror's move. Maybe it made him great, maybe it didn't. What did he steal? All of the gold. So as he's proclaiming himself as the new emperor of Babylon, and they're welcoming him with open arms, what was their response when he came into the city?
You're our savior and liberator.
All right, yeah, they had a parade for him, a huge parade for them. How quickly they turn on their former leader, right? So they have this huge parade for Alexander as he comes in. They're throwing all of these flowers in the air as he parades through, and then he steals all their money, equivalent to billions of dollars today. Now, hey, why wouldn't he, right?
If you run an empire, you need a centralized treasury.
You do,
You
exactly.
have multiple ones lying around
Why
in your
wouldn't
city.
you have done that, right? What else?
And he continues to rape all their women.
Yeah, he does. All right, now he continues to, or
Well,
And
his men,
there we go,
right,
soldiers.
he gives them
permission to pillage and rape all of their women. Yes, okay, and so I don't know that Alexander was doing much of that. All right, primacy there will be established because of the Battle of Gaugamela. All right, so at Gaugamela, who had the numerical advantage here?
The Gargamel.
All right, so the Persians, they're fighting at Gaugamela. So the Persians had the advantage here. Here's Darius right in the center of the line, and so he's thinking with their might of numbers and the arrows that they're going to be firing upon the Macedonian troops, that they'll have no problems. Plus, what else do the Persians have that they think are not a secret weapon because they've been around forever, but they think this is like their key to victory. They've got a lot of them. Not cavalry and not elephants, but not ballistas. The Persians, not ballistas, but not longbows. Chariots. All right, they're going to come in on their chariots of fire. Now, hold on. What are the Macedonians using that look so much less civilized but are far more effective? Cavalry. All right, so they're going to bring the cavalry. It's going to come to good use here. You can see that the Macedonians are going to end up taking kind of swerving around here against Darius and his men. And then the Alexander, wearing his plumed outfit, very visible in the heat of battle, is going to shoot straight into the line and come face to face, apparently, with Darius himself. But somehow, in the melee of battle, Darius will be able to escape. So at that point, the Babylonians, as he comes into the city, they proclaim him king of the universe. And with such a large empire, it seems that he has actually done it. Right? He's got a massive empire at this point, and so Darius III's fate, as we heard, he gets murdered, and then Alexander takes care of business after that. Now the question is, as he's establishing this empire, is he just drunk and narcissistic, or is he just an authoritative? What do you think?
It's pretty hard to
He
call
doesn't really
yourself a
give you a
god.
look
and
up.
not
Just an
be
authority.
Okay, so he calls himself a god, but is he the only one calling himself a god?
No.
Well, I mean, after Darius is dead, I mean,
Yeah, aren't so many others calling him a god as well?
Aren't they just appeasing him, kind of this craziness, like, oh yeah, you are a god.
no, that-
Yeah! I mean, we can't beat you, so why would we not call you a god? Don't kill me, okay? I mean, most of the cities that surrender to him surrender because they heard of what happened to places like Tyre, Thebes, etc. They heard what happened to Darius and all of his men at Gaugamela. They're willing to submit at that point because they don't want to die. I mean, they value their own lives. And then another fun fact about him, though, at this point is, as he's going through establishing his empire, they're hanging out there for several years, and while they're hanging out, getting drunk on a nightly basis, he's reorganizing the whole system. And one thing that he'll do is he'll name 57 cities after himself. That's, humble. He'll name one after his horse, Bucephalus. Why not? It's a good beast of burden. He'll name several after Hephaestion, his lover. And also name a city after his dog. I don't remember the name of the dog, but he named a city after his dog because his dog was semi-divine too, because it's, Alexander's. All right, yes.
The truth is, he was a authoritative drunk narcissist.
An authoritative and just drunk narcissist. Yes. Okay. So he developed a cult of personality. All the city names are only one aspect of that, but all of the coins from now on will be minted with his image upon it. You notice what's he wearing in that image? Plumed helmet. His plumed helmet, because he is a conqueror, and he wants to make sure everybody knows that. All right. Now, during the
It's true. I mean, we put the president's faces on our
Indeed we do, yes. Okay, and then in order to show off his military glory, George Washington, as he rode from town to town, would ride in on his white steed that he used throughout the Revolutionary War. And he would always make sure everybody saw him on it. Granted, as soon as he left the town, he'd get in a nice comfy carriage and ride to the next town. Then he'd, all right, hold on, stop. Couple miles outside of town, get on my horse. Oh, look at me, military glory. Yes.
I mean, to be fair though, we had the president's faces that are on money. The presidents didn't put their face on the money. People in the future put them on the money.
That is so true.
They're not Washington going, I want my face on the $1 bill.
No, he didn't. He probably would have been appalled, honestly. Okay. And then he's going to start marrying himself to some women that he didn't always like very much because he is trying to solidify his political authority. And so the first princess that he will marry was a Babylonian princess by the name of Roxanne. Apparently, she was super hot and super lethal. Really lethal, all right? She, in fact, probably killed his third wife, Paratis, who was a Bactrian. So she's deep into the heartland, kind of in the Afghanistan area. When he married her, he apparently was quite smitten with her because she danced very prettily. She was kind of a glorified stripper. All right, so he liked her, and therefore she had her killed. At least that's what the rumors say. All right, so Stateria was another one, and you notice a fun fact about her. Why would he marry that girl? All right, Darius' daughter. All right, some of the plunder that he actually took at Gaugamela. Darius, such a pansy. The guy rode from the battle with his guards in tow behind him and left behind his wife and his mother and a lot of gold. Left behind his wife, mother, and all the gold right there at Gaugamela. And Alexander finds all of them, takes them captive, and says, well, I guess I'll be good to you. I'll marry your daughter.
Does nobody think of like the strategic qualities of bringing your family?
Yeah. Good point. Apparently not. They still did it in the Revolutionary War. They're going to do it for a while. Okay. All right. So he starts to practice a new thing, though, called proskinesis. All right. Proskinesis is a method of doing what? Anyone know? Prostrating oneself. What does that mean? All right, exactly. So it's kowtowing, essentially, is what other cultures will call it, like the Chinese. But you're going down on your knees and bending down, putting your forehead to the ground. Now, that is not a Macedonian thing that they do, right? That's not something that the monarchy would have done in Macedon. So why is he doing it?
Because the Persians did that.
Because the Persians did it. So is he increasingly becoming less Macedonian, more and more Persian? Narcissistic even? All right, what do you think his men are saying as he's naming cities after himself and his horse and his dog, and then minting all of these coins with his image and none of his men's images, and then also making his own men prostrate themselves in front of him as a king? What do you think they're thinking of this? As they're in a foreign land, they've been gone from their homes for 5 years. Why did they go to Persia in the first place? To fight for what?
Revenge.
For revenge. They've gotten it, right? War's over. Darius is gone. 150 years after the first invasion. I think we're done here, right? His men keep saying, let's go back to Macedonia. And he's like, but look at the hanging gardens. But look at the palaces. And then one night he gets super drunk with his friends, and they're like, we should burn Darius' palace. He says, yeah! And then he toasts some wine, and they burn the palace to the ground to appease the men and make them happy. And the next morning he was really sad about it. All right, so, he's just doing weird things. He's kind of all over the place, is the fact. So the men start to grumble, and then some of them start to conspire. We heard in the Kuhuk game about Philotas and Parmenion. Parmenion was a general under Philip II, and now is serving as kind of one of the lead generals here to Alexander. And so as they're traipsing around through Bactria, Philotas, the son of Parmenion, and a close friend of Alexander's, both start to complain, saying, why are we here? Why are we in this ridiculous territory? Why don't we go home now that the mission is done and you've got a huge empire? Why not be happy with what you've got? And what does he think of that? So they possibly were involved in an assassination attempt. Maybe, maybe not. He claimed they were. And so he had them assassinated. All right, and then another one of his close friends, one of his closest friends and companions throughout all of this battling, and he had also been a student of Aristotle's. They'd grown up together. His name was Clytus. Clytus was angry because one night they were all sitting around drinking, and Alexander started, in a drunken revelry here, started to say, you know what? My father never loved me. Philip never even acknowledged my gloriousness. And then Clytus gets angry. He just can't take it anymore. Throws down his goblet of wine, stands up and says that Alexander will never be the general that his father was. Oh! A gasp goes through the room. At that point, Alexander grabs a spear and runs him through, puts him on the floor, and then falls to his knees and weeps over his dead friend's body. And then he was apparently suicidal. Then he went into his tent for 3 days and hid in shame and terror of what he had done, weeping every single day. Or was it a clever political move to show everyone that he felt bad about murdering his friend? Did he really feel bad? What do you think? I don't know.
It was a false flag. He's faking.
He's faking? Alright, well, that's the question. I don't know. Alright, so then he's going to take his men on a campaign to India. Again, they say, why? But then again, why? What do you think?
Why not?
Okay, I like that. That was so perfect. Alright. Not only that, but he is a conqueror. And similar to the Neo-Assyrian Empire that we saw earlier, where, remember they believed... Nice shot. Alright, remember when they believed that if you didn't keep conquering, what happens? It's the end of the world. God will destroy you. He's essentially feeling the same way at this point. He's not even, I think he's like 30 years old at this point. He's thinking, I've done this for like 7 or 8 years now. I just keep conquering. If I don't continue to conquer, then I'm going to essentially lose everything. And so the men are grumbling at this point. They're saying, we just keep going farther. By the way, where are they when they really start to get angsty? What? The Himalayas. All right, so they're going to go through the Himalayas, and then where are they going to end up at before they finally stop? By the way, do you want to trounce through the Himalayas? No. Okay, and they did. Okay, which is pretty cool. Really makes them great if you think about it. Led his men on that campaign, and then where do they end up? The League of Shadows. Not yet. Where do they end up geographically before they finally stop? All right, India. So they end up in India, right? They're passing through the Tibetan area, go into India, and once they get there, it's monsoon season. All right, monsoon season in India is awful, apparently. Haven't lived through it yet, but they say it's absolutely awful. And there's these weird monkeys that like jump from the teak trees and actually attack the men, and they can't seem to get rid of these stupid monkeys. Plus, there's malaria, which can paralyze you. All right, so no one's having a good time here. And so the big question is, as his men are grumbling, should Alex bend to the will of his men or continue to conquer? What do you say? Continue conquering.
At a later date.
Yeah!
At a later date.
At a later date? But if you stop now, you're just going to stop, aren't you? His men are like, hey man, we are literally 9,000 miles from home. Can we go home now, please? All right? He's like, no, can't stop conquering. We just got to keep going. And then fate intervenes, maybe. All right, there's a divine omen. His men see an eagle, all right, or excuse me, a falcon. And what does that represent to Alexander? Anyone? The gods are speaking to him because he had always kind of imagined like his spirit animal, so to speak, as a falcon, because he'd seen falcons like a Galgamela, for instance, flying over his men, and he took that as a sign of, oh, we were victorious at Gaugamela, and so therefore that falcon was a sign that, yes, the gods want me to be successful. Now he sees that falcon again, and then it turns away. Well, he actually didn't see it. You know who saw it? His men saw it. His men said, we just saw a falcon fly back towards Macedonia. You know what that means, don't you, Alex? What? What does it mean? Go back to Macedonia! Duh! All right, so he says, works for me. Okay. So it's a nice face-saving moment because he says, well, my men hate me right now, but I guess I should turn back because the gods tell me to. So it's a face-saving thing for both sides here, really. Now the option is, should we take the coastal route? If we are Alexander the Great, should we take the coast, get on some boats, and then go around all the way up here, and then, have to trounce through that lovely area, and then get back up into Macedonia? We could take our men by ships. Or should we go through the desert? Should we go through the desert or go through the coastal route?
Okay, every time somebody famous or important gets on a boat, it has a higher chance of sinking. It just does. It's science.
Okay.
So,
I'll accept it.
Yeah,
I'll accept it.
But
It's
thousands of men through a desert, that's a bad idea.
Okay. So what's he going to pick?
Desert.
Why would he go through the desert?
Because that's where the falcon's going.
Oh, okay. That's where the falcon's going. Or does he want to punish his insubordinate men? Because we'll see from the results, it does not go well. Out of his 25,000 men, from his group of men, 25,000 of them will end up dying in the desert because of all the problems of the elements, all of the lack of water and nutrients, and so that's 3/4 of his men here are dying on the way home. And so, lesson being, you don't want to join in Alexander's army. You might be victorious for a while, but the man just doesn't know when to stop. And then things get even more crazy when Hephaestion dies. So Hephaestion, in all likelihood, either died from malaria or poisoning. All right, one of the two. Now, either one is certainly on the table at this point, because can we see why, since he's the best friend of Alexander, why some people may not like him very much? You see why that might happen?
He's very
He's a
likable.
brown noser.
Like,
Okay.
yeah, like he might be fine, and as you say something and he snaps.
Yeah, he snaps the other way very quickly, doesn't he? In fact, a good example of him snapping, Hephaestion was sick for a couple of weeks, very sick for a couple of weeks, and he became increasingly paralyzed, starting with the legs, moving into the arms, the chest, and finally he just couldn't breathe anymore and died. And so after being sick for a long time, Alexander's mourning this whole time, of course, begging the doctors to save this guy. And when the doctor couldn't save him, you know what he did? Kill him. Slit his throat! Killed the doctor! And then anyone that helped him! Oh, okay. And so in fact, they killed the doctor, then had some the helpers come and stand over his body, and then killed each one over that doctor's body. So just to send the message, you don't mess with my boyfriend's bodies, I guess, essentially is what he's saying. All right, and then on his deathbed, the same thing ends up happening to Alexander here. He becomes increasingly paralyzed, starting with the legs, moving to the arms and to the chest, and then he can't breathe, and he's just gurgling at this point. And they're saying, "Sir," he's not even 33 years old at this point, and he's saying, "Sir, what do we do with the empire? Who's in charge of the empire? Who should it go to?" What does he say? To the strongest. It shall go to the strongest. All right, now is that a very good way to leave your empire? Yeah, probably should organize it just a little bit better. Okay, pretty cool way to do it, but should have maybe planned that a little better. So what was it? Was it malaria? Was it poisoning? Typhoid fever, maybe? Poison.
I
Similar instances,
How
certainly.
far apart did they die?
You know,
It
I
was
have to look that up, but
That's actually right.
it was pretty close, as
Okay.
far as I can remember.
Poison.
Because remember, his whole career takes place over the course of 16 to 33. That's how old he was when he started.
I don't know any disease that does that.
Yeah.
Makes you paralyzed, but I know a lot of poisons that
Actually,
do that.
so some research has shown that it could have been poison. That's what many people have assumed throughout the centuries. But some research has shown that it could have been malaria because they're in a malarial-infested area like India. And then other research has shown that it could have been typhoid fever, which you could have gotten from lack of hand washing. I mean, you meant come on, they don't have sanitizer at the time or soap, really? Right? Okay, so good chance that he died of one of the two. But you know what's more fun? Poison, right? Especially since both of them ended up very much the same way. Yes.
You might already know this, but there's quite a lot of people that think that Joseph Stalin might have been poisoned.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And he's a good guy to poison, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He's a good guy to poison. All right. Yes.
It was actually an STD.
Okay.
It was actually syphilis. I was right, and I was.
All right, maybe. All right, so here you go. Here's a little video to show us a little bit more about his legacy.
Alexander marched over half the circumference of the earth. Along the way, he never lost a battle, and he stacked up a huge body count. He became a bloodthirsty megalomaniac who believed himself a god. He murdered loyal companions, and may well have had a hand in his own father's assassination. So where does such behavior put him on a psychological scale of tyrants? Was he a psychopathic, thrill-seeking killer like Caligula, or a cold, goal-driven killer like Genghis Khan?
Alexander has a pattern of excessive and needless cruelty without remorse, so he has some features of a psychopathic killer. However, he's not all about bloodlust. Much of the violence is very goal-directed.
That makes Alexander a little of both, goal-directed with a touch of the psychopath. And there's another key factor, his narcissism.
Alexander scores very highly on a narcissism scale. His need to be special, his need for the world to know that he's special, his need to be connected to the gods, all show that he's a narcissist.
So who in history shares similar character traits with Alexander?
Alexander reminds me of Napoleon, the military commander. They both pursue their own aims. They both want to conquer the world. They both can't get enough glory. and they both believe they are right.
Driven by obsessive self-belief, Alexander built the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Though he had a cruel streak a mile wide, his personal biographer made sure he was remembered for his military prowess. That's why, over 2,000 years later, he's still known as Alexander the Great.
Oh, they make him look so nefarious. I'm sorry about that poor quality digital editing there. Yeah, the CGI was pretty awful for that. All right, now here's a little bit better take on Alexander the Great.
Today we're going to look at Alexander of Macedon's story by examining 3 possible definitions of greatness. First, maybe Alexander was great because of his accomplishments. This is an extension of the idea that history is the record of the deeds of great men. Now, of course, that's ridiculous. For one thing, half of people are women. For another, and this is important, there are lots of historical events that no one can take responsibility for, like, for instance, the Black Plague. Still, Alexander was accomplished. I mean, he conquered a lot of territory, like, a lot. His father Philip had conquered all of Greece, but Alexander did what the Spartans and the Athenians had failed to do. He destroyed the Persian Empire. He conquered all the land the Persians had held, including Egypt, and then marched toward India, stopping at the Indus River only because his army was like, hey, Alexander, you know what would be awesome? Not marching. Also, Alexander was a really good general, although historians disagree over whether his tactics were truly brilliant or if his army just happened to have better technology, specifically these extra long spears called sarissas. But much of his reputation as a general and his reputation in general, anybody? Puns? Maybe I should stop? Okay. Is because of Napoleon. Napoleon, like many other generals through the millennia, was obsessed with Alexander the Great, but more on that in a moment. That said, Alexander wasn't very good at what we might now call empire building. Alexander's empire is definitely visually impressive, but it wasn't actually much of an empire. Like, Alexander specialized in the tearing down of things, but he wasn't so great at the building up of institutions to replace the things he'd torn down. And that's why pretty soon after his death, his empire broke into 3 empires called the Hellenistic kingdoms. Each was ruled by one of Alexander's generals, and they became important dynasties: the Antigonids in Greece and Macedonia, the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in Persia, all of which lasted longer than Alexander's empire itself. A second kind of greatness, maybe Alexander was great because he had an enormous impact on the world after his death. Like King Tut, Alexander the Great was amazingly good at being a dead person. Let's go to the thought bubble. So after Alexander of Macedon died, everyone, from the Romans to Napoleon to Oliver Stone, loved him, and he was an important military model for many generals throughout history, but his main post-death legacy may be that he introduced the Persian idea of absolute monarchy to the Greco-Roman world, which would become a pretty big deal. Alexander also built a number of cities on his route that became big deals after his death, and it's easy to spot them because he named most of them after himself, and one after his horse. The Alexandria in Egypt became a major center of learning in the classical world and was home to the most amazing library ever, which Julius Caesar probably accidentally burned down while trying to conquer a bunch of land to emulate his hero, Alexander the Great. Plus, the dead Alexander had a huge impact on culture. He gave the region its common language, Greek, which facilitated conversations and commerce. Greek was so widespread that archaeologists have found coins in what is now Afghanistan with pictures of their kings with the word king written beneath the pictures in Greek. This is also why, incidentally, the New Testament was eventually written in Greek. Although Alexander was mostly just conquering territory for the glory and heroism and greatness of it all, in his wake emerged a more closely connected world that could trade and communicate with more people more efficiently than ever before. Alexander didn't make those things happen, but they probably wouldn't have happened without him. But here's a question. If you're watching Jersey Shore and get so involved in the situation's romantic conquest that you leave the bathwater running, thereby flooding your apartment, and you have to call a plumber, and the plumber comes over and you fall in love with him and get married and live happily ever after, does that make the situation responsible for your marriage? Thanks, Thought Bubble. Okay, a third definition of greatness. Maybe Alexander is great because of his legend. Since no accounts of Alexander were written while he was alive, embellishment was easy. And maybe that's where true greatness lies. I mean, the guy died at 32 before he ever had a chance to get old and lose battles. He was tutored by Aristotle, for God's sakes. Then there's Alexander's single-minded, obsessive, Ahab-esque pursuit of the Persian king Darius, who he chased across modern-day Iraq and Iran for no real reason except that he desperately wanted to kill him. And when Bessus, one of Darius's generals, assassinated him before Alexander had the chance, Alexander chased Bessus around until he could at least kill him. These almost comical pursuits pursuits of glory and heroism are accompanied in classical histories by stories of Alexander walking through the desert and it's suddenly raining and these ravens coming to lead him to the army he's supposed to fight. And stories of his hot Persian wife Roxana, who while still a teenager engineered the assassination of many of Alexander's fellow wives. And even in his death, people tried to make Alexander live up to this heroic ideal. Like Plutarch tells us that he died of a fever, but that's no way for a masculine, empire-building, awesome person to die. So rumors persist that he died either of alcohol poisoning or else of assassination-y poisoning. I mean, no great man can die of a fever.
So true, isn't it? So true. All right, so that brings us to the debate. So get on your sides. Let's have pro-Alexander over here, and then con-Alexander over there.
No great man fever.
All right, Kane's going to go first. Kane, you are on the pro side, correct?
Okay. Alexander the Great has a legacy that is basically unmatched and still considered spectacular, even by today's standards. There have been many people to bear the name the Great in the word the Great in their name, but Alexander is one of the few people that have actually earned the title. He conquered most of the known world by the mere age of 33, won every battle he fought, and won it handily. However, you don't make your mark on history without causing controversy. Alexander had flaws like his brutality, his hubris, and his thirst for power. However, that does not mean we should just ignore his accomplishments and the positive effect his legacy has had on history and how his name echoes throughout history.
We won.
Yeah!
All right. Very good. Con side. All right. Say that. All right. You're up next.
To call someone great, we need to look not necessarily at what they did, though that plays a part in it, but also how they did it, and their morals in general as well. For instance, using another historical example, even though Stalin won against the Nazis, and conquered most of Europe and Central Asia, we don't call him Stalin the Great.
Some do.
We don't live in
we don't live in backwoods Siberia.
All right.
It's still cool.
Good point.
It's still the 80s. He killed millions and millions of people. And the thing is that Alexander's no better than Stalin or any number of dictators that have existed throughout history that are fueled by nothing but their own aggression. For instance, we can say he was a good tactician. He built an empire. But he doesn't deserve the title of the Great, because he is a terrible moral character. Unless a city bowed to him immediately, he typically slaughtered the populace. Even then, even if they, surrendered immediately, they still weren't that safe, and, there was rapings and pillagings, and, there was no good way that he went about conquering places. None of it was ever great. And he also encouraged, soldiers taking foreign wives and erasing the local culture. He was a warmongering imperialist, plain and simple.
Ooh, shots fired.
Even the basic motivations for his war against Persia were nothing but petty revenge for an event that happened before he was born to a people that he did not belong to. And even then, when he took over Persia, right, he should have stopped there. He could have stopped there, but he didn't. Because that wasn't ever the goal. The goal was conquering. He's like Agamemnon in the Iliad. Even though the reasons for fighting were over, he still kept at it. Until he died.
I want to add something. Alexander
right.
at least fought his battles, unlike Agamemnon.
Oh! Touche! All right, so now we're gonna hear from the con side. That was a great argument, Jackson. Thank you. Pro side.
Can we counter his thing?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Go for it, James.
Yes. I'll tear you apart.
Here we go.
On the side of morals, why isn't Jesus known as Jesus the Great? It's all about morals, defining a person.
Because Jesus was all about being humble.
Yeah, so if he's remembered as being the great, Alexander the Great, he didn't call himself the Great. Other people called him great after he died.
That is
That's a
very
lie.
false. You're right. He didn't call himself great. He called himself a god.
Yeah, sorry. Because when your mom teaches you when you're at a young age.
My mom.
His mom. That's what you're supposed to do. You're going to trust your mom when you're 3 years old calling you a god, honestly.
My mom has never called me a god.
It's one thing to believe your mom when you're 3. It's another to grow up and still believe you're a god.
All right, let's hear from Sophia. Oh, actually, to counter that argument first, go for it, Lexi.
His mom slept with snakes and stuff, so I don't know.
Yeah, can we really trust her?
Yeah.
It's kind of a psycho.
All right, Sophia.
Well, I'm saying, I'm citing the source
faulting
that you
Alexander.
had on the
Uh-huh.
link, and it said, the Egyptians began to call him a god, and he turned to this and asked him not to call him that.
Oh, so he's got some humility. Hmm. All right, what was that, Aubrey?
Also lies then too.
Oh.
If you call him a god, maybe he calls himself a god.
Do as I say, not as I do.
All right, Jacob, you had another argument to make, correct?
So, I'm sure we've all heard the expression that actions speak louder than words, which is exactly why Alexander is not a great man. You do have to acknowledge the fact that he did impressively conquer the known world. At the same time, he hardly left anyone in it to be conquered.
Oh, snap!
Roasted.
He was a narcissist who killed everyone and anyone, sometimes for no reason, and all he really did was kill a bunch of people. So did Hitler. He took a kingdom or an area and expanded it, just like Hitler. Hitler is not called Adolf the Great. He's in fact called one of the worst human beings that ever existed. The fact is, the victors write the history pages. So the only reason we consider Alexander a great man was because at what we know easily could have been sword point, his biographers, fearing for their lives, had to write up a story about a man who considered himself a god and needed it to make it sound as such so that they themselves weren't killed, just like as most of Alexander's closest friends were killed for questioning really stupid things about him.
And was it that stupid to question the idea of why are we here still?
No, yes, it wasn't. Like, they were killed for that. So, of course, the history books are going to say, this man is a god, when you're fearing that he's going to kill you for anything, literally.
All right, let's hear a response. We'll get to you next. Let's hear it from Josie.
I would just like to quote something that we read in the two debates. There was one quote from J.R.
Yeah.
But he said that the word great in this context, to my mind, is always positive, implying both that Alexander's achievements were huge in scale and that his nature was heroic and awe-inspiring. The question many in the modern world might ask, however, is, do these two things go hand in hand? Perhaps in the scale of his achievements, Alexander the Great, but in his nature was terrible. So you could think about, yes, he was great, and he has done a lot of things, but he was great at everything that he did.
Ooh,
Yeah. Say Alexander the Great. They typically connote positive things with the word great.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so it is clear that Alexander was a ferocious king that continually hungered for power. He was able to expand his empire through brutal displays of his army's strength and through intimidation. He committed atrocities that rivals the cruelty of Stalin and Genghis Khan. Alexander was an incredibly narcissistic person who is so entirely self-obsessed, he literally thinks himself of as a god. And so much of what he has done is frowned upon by modern culture, looking at it from the beliefs and views that we have today. And so with that being said, actions such as that done at Tyre could be compared to the actions of U.S. troops in the Vietnamese town of My Lai.
Whoa!
All right.
So I would just like to say that in this case, in the case of My Lai, the men have been reprimanded for their actions, and they've gone down in history as men who have committed deplorable acts. And so why should we have a double standard? Why should we have a double standard in this scenario? Why then should we give Alexander a free pass to eternal glory, given the nature of his actions?
All right, and
okay, I want to fact check that. The general who was responsible for for Miley. He was pardoned by Nixon. Now he's a tax collector.
Yeah, insurance salesman.
Insurance.
Yeah, you are correct.
I thought they would be the
All right. Now, no, hold on, though. No, I've got a question for Aiden, though, and the con side. Is it fair for us to judge Alexander by today's morality?
No.
Yeah,
No, really.
Mm.
Even in that day, things he was doing.
All right, what was that, Lexi?
Like, you can't just say Alexander. We could like judge everybody. Like we judge people now. It's
Yeah.
for our standards now.
Okay, so can we apply that to the past?
Well,
I
mean, I know it's a different time.
Take, for example, even for
all
their
of these
standards,
authorities.
crucifying 2,000 men.
That's a lot of
on every-
people. That is a lot of people.
Even
Is-
talking about morality just doesn't work.
All right.
Even going by morality of those standards, we haven't even once brought up the fact that like he openly let his men like rape women and do whatever. Like we haven't brought that up. Back then,
He
that was what you did
encouraged
when you
it.
took over a country. What you didn't do was kill your closest friends, your best generals, half your army, plus just because they said a Falcon's is returning home, let's go home. I'm homesick and my wife is 9,000 miles that way.
Mm-hmm. Touche. Yeah. All right. Samuel. And then Katie.
Sparta tribes use the similar things, just less well executed. They are better in military tactic, and Sparta would have done the same thing had they had capabilities.
Spartans did not. Yeah, well, I mean, pretty sure the advanced.
They did, but not the Sarissas. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Katie.
And I would like to bring up the discrepancy of the bibliographers because according to now historians, Greeks and Romans would always blame the women for being raped. And I have a quote in his bibliographies of what women would do in Babylonia, and so how all of his men would come in and they would be the ones undressing. And so, I mean, even on their standards, rape isn't nice.
Yeah.
And so that is.
So even at the
isn't
time,
nice.
they would have
even
judged
at
that.
the time, that would have been morally disrupted. And it also showed points of how his bibliographers were skewing the truth of his greatness.
Okay. Johnny, you were going to add to that?
I just want to say that there's a modern group now that also executes publicly and mass executes, and when they walk into a town, everyone surrenders, and that's ISIS.
Is that, yeah, okay. that modern group, yes, okay. Let's hear a reply. Pro side, what do you got? I mean, they just threw down Hitler and ISIS and rape.
The only thing they have is support for a warmongering imperialist.
The only thing you have against us is his morality.
What do you?
All right, Molly had her hand up first, and then Shay.
Okay, so when we call him Alexander the Great, we're not calling him like Alexander the Moral or the Humble or anything like that.
One of your own people quoted a quote that said great implies like.
All right, let her speak. Go ahead. All right. We're all friends here still. We're all friends. So, Molly, you can continue your argument.
Yeah, if we say he's great, we're referring mostly to his accomplishments and the consequences of his accomplishments, which still have been unmatched today, militarily and otherwise.
Yeah.
So he's still done more than any one single person today, and I think that's what makes him great, not necessarily the motives behind it.
Okay. All right. Shay, you had something to add to that?
Okay, you guys keep stressing the fact that he was not a moral person, but an argument against that is he spared the lives of the wife and children of his most hated enemy.
And then married the daughter.
What's wrong with marriage? Now you're dogging marriage?
He respected
his 17
Okay.
that they were royalty, and he spared their lives.
Do you think he
Mm.
had two people
How can you know? You weren't there.
Mm.
There's my guess. Here's my
All right, Jackson, what's next?
I would like to say, maybe you could say he's great because of his acts. And like his actions, right? His accomplishments. Yeah, many of his acts and accomplishments were absolutely terrible and reprehensible. So if you're looking at the acts, neither his acts nor his actual character were moral.
All right, by a score of 13 to 10, Con side.
Yeah.